Egan here again. Thought I'd read a little passage. Not a particularly bright day today, so I thought I'd get in and do some recording. Weather's coming in, and we've got about a good 4 days of solid rain ahead of us, so that's a good time to get started. So I'm going to start on Chapter 1 on Eyes Over Earth, Book 1. So here we go. Chapter 1, Enter the Alien. Since 1999, Jim hadn't given a moment's thought to his first UFO sighting until Thursday, the 18th of September, 2008. He was out the front taking Christopher for a quick squat and drop, as Timothy calls it. Christopher is the 8-year-old boxer dog. They adopted him from the local animal shelter. Anyway, he cocked his leg against Stella's prize fuchsias. Jim noticed a descending fog that night, and gazing up through the fog, spotted a plane's running lights, one yellow out front, blue on its left and green on the right. Those aren't normal running lights, he noticed. It was heading straight towards Jim. Well, he was familiar with the light aircraft overhead, as the local airport is only 20 minutes from Arriba. Bloody hell, he said aloud. Where's the noise? No sound came from the plane at all. His engine must have failed. He checked the aircraft's lessening altitude so it didn't bear down on any houses. When, without warning, it changed direction in a sharp 90-degree turn. No airplane could have matched its manoeuvrability. As fast as it came into sight, it was lost into the fog. What kept springing into mind was how spooky the whole event felt. There was no sound, Jim realised. It seemed strange how deadly quiet Mariba was. No traffic and no one walking the streets. It appeared as if the whole event was perfectly timed, because usually this time of the night a steady flow of cars and people passed their home. Jim called Christopher to come back inside. He came running over, wagging his stumpy tail, satisfied having taken care of business. Walking towards the back door, Jim contemplated telling Stella what he'd just witnessed, but by the time he reached the back door, decided this one he'd keep to himself. Of course I would. Once again, the events of that evening became less important as the hustle and bustle of their busy lives took over. Jim's memory is affected by his illness, fibromyalgia, and not able to concentrate on the simplest of tasks made the event slip further from his mind. Another year drifted by without a single sighting. Yeah, time does go fast when you're having fun. And it was time to do his evening chore with the dog. That duty is taking their beautiful new 1.5-year-old Harlequin Great Dane and Arab Mastiff cross called Jess out for a quick squat and drop. They'd lost poor Christopher to illness a month earlier. Jess started her usual route around the front yard, and while she was busy, Jim gazed at the stars. This has always been a good way to relax. Helps me put all my problems into perspective, he said to Jess, while thinking, it's another beautiful night. Jess tried to catch a cane toad. Leave those damn things alone. They'll make you sick, you crazy dog. Gazing up again, Jim tried to see the planet Mars, but gave up in disgust. He didn't know which planet is which, or where the known constellations were. Yet viewing them has and always will be therapeutic to his soul. Peering down at Jess, Jim realised she hadn't finished, so gazed up and wondered, what if that thing's still up there after all these years? Concentrating, he worked out its relevant position to where he stood years ago in Tasmania. Reminiscing, he faced southwest and recalled the night. It was close to the end of July 1999. On a clear and chilly night, while stargazing on the balcony of his home, which faced the beautiful Tamar River. The home offered generous views of the Batman Bridge and surrounding river frontage. It was around 9 o'clock in the evening with a moonless sky, giving the stars a sharper contrast against the blackness of space. Another advantage of the countryside is the benefit of no streetlights distorting your view above. Also, on the odd occasion, when Jim was lucky enough, he'd catch the glimpse of an asteroid's last moments and watch it fall towards Earth in a white-hot death roll. Wow. Jim gave his glasses a clean on the corner of his flannelette shirt, making it easier to see. There's nothing worse than gazing through dirty spectacles, he thought. Never ceased to amaze Jim just how much junk floated around up there, including pieces of multi-stage rockets and old satellites no longer in use. Suddenly, his eyes spotted a bright object, a satellite moving east to west. Wow, isn't that amazing, Jim? Jim could even see its anti-clockwise rotation. Once again thinking, how clear the air is, when what he saw defied everything you ever hear from governmental authorities regarding UFOs. Officially, they don't exist. Jim followed the path of the satellite when a strange object swerved out of its way. In doing so, the sun reflected on what he considered to be the underside of the exposed. It was enormous. Guessing by how small the satellite appeared, it was the size of a house. That's the side he could see. Heaven knows how tall it was. The pitted side facing Jim had a rough texture like an orange skin. In a strange way, it looked organic. Only when the vessel changed course, it came into view, which made him suspect it had stealth ability, because once it dodged the oncoming satellite, it vanished from sight. Jim found south in relation to where the sun rises in Mariba and turned his gaze upward to the south-southwest and searched in that area of space. Yeah, it wasn't long before he found it again, there in stationary orbit, right where it had been 9 years ago. What the bloody hell could it be doing up there all this time? Was there someone in it? Or it is an automated probe? Strange how its colour is darker than the night sky. If it's got a cloaking device, then it's not working too well, he can continue to think. I can see it, Jim said to Jess, who stood next to him waiting for an invitation back inside. Jim speculated why more people haven't spotted it, or maybe someone else has, but they're keeping it a secret too, in fear of incarceration as a nutcase. Jim knew he hadn't bragged or confessed to any alien conspiracies. He guessed people can sit on secrets for ages these days, and laughed at himself because he was one too. Come on, Jess. We've been eating long enough. Stella will think we've been abducted. Jim laughed as he twisted her head in response. Like a bolt of lightning, Jim's body doubled up with the shock of transport, and his human form left our earthly plane in an instant. Opening one eye, Jim took a moment to recall what had happened. With both eyes open, he surveyed the surroundings. Cold and shivering, he stood up from what looked like a large dinner plate meters wide. His eyes now adjusted to the low light. Jim stepped off the platform and fell unceremoniously on his face. Unbeknownst to him, on the floor of this strange environment lay gelatinous ooze. Wiping it from his face, Jim caught a whiff and dry reached from the stench. After great effort, he managed to stand and look around. Have I shrunk somehow and Jess licked me up? He considered. No, don't be stupid, he whispered, gagging again on the foul smell in his nostrils. Remembering he still had a mobile phone in his top pocket, Jim wiped his hands clean as best he could and took it out to dial his wife. Waking the phone from slumber, he noticed there was 3 bars of reception and promptly tapped her contact details. Stella, it's me, Jim. What the devil are you calling me for? Has Jess finished the business? I don't know. In fact, I don't know where I am. Brow furrowed, Stella made for the back door. What's that fool gone and done now, she thought, standing on the bottom step. Jess came trotting over, wagging her tail. There's Jim, Jess. Hearing his name, she dropped her head and followed his scent, heading out front to where the trail ended on damp lawn, fresh dew from a clear night covering unprotected areas. Looking about for her husband, Stella put the phone to her ear and said, Where the devil are you? I don't know. Jim walked on carefully, his shoes slipping on the floor. Close to one of the walls, he noticed it resembled raw meat. A myriad of veins, carrying multicoloured fluid heaven knows where. I'm scared, Stella. Jim held the phone tightly against his ear, a lifeline he daren't let go. Look, I've just about had it with your crap. Now, where are you? She said, not seeing the funny side of his prank. She lost patience. While walking further through what resembled the Little Shop of Horrors, Jim came across a transparent membrane stretched between thick, exposed bones. In shock, he stared down at the blue marble. "Holy shit," he said, coming to a rapid conclusion. "I know exactly where I am." "Where are you, then?" Stella asked in frustration. "Remember when I told you about that ship I saw in Tasmania all those years ago?" "Yeah, sort of," she said in answer. "Well, that's where I am." Looking down, he could make out the coast of East Africa passing under light cloud cover. "Oh, pull the other one." "Now, where are you?" Stella asked abruptly. "Really, I'm telling you the truth." "Look, when you've finished playing your little joke, come inside. I'll be going to work soon." Stella tapped the mobile and called Jess to follow, making her way inside. "Stella, are you still there?" He held the phone out and could see she'd hung up. "Ah, that's just marvellous," he groaned, shaking his head in disbelief at the sight below. Jim turned and whispered to himself, "Fortune favours the brave." Deciding continue, he walked on. Excuse me. Descending the gentle incline, he strode on and marvelled at the size of the sickening assault on the senses, knowing he'd suffer many a sleepless night if ever he made it home. He put one foot in front of the other and ventured on. Rounding a corner, he entered what clearly resembled a control room. Several gadgets mounted on walls popped and whistled when he came close. Filled with overwhelming desire, he reached up and touched the lever, begging to be tweaked. "Do not touch that." Jim nearly jumped out of his skin at the demand. "Who's there?" he asked, looking around. "It is I, the master of this vessel." Again, Jim cringed at the strength of its reply. Looking about, he considered the inhabitant might be invisible, but dismissed this conclusion immediately when the wall, not far from him, shivered like jello on a platter, and an opening appeared, and what stepped forth caused him to scream like a little girl. "Oh, I've got to show more courage than this," he decided, backing against the wall, hands out behind him. Jim stopped when he felt something similar to fresh meat. "Yes, gather yourself, Jim. Time is against us, and we must act now." The strange-looking beast moved over towards a control panel and with ease made an outline of a man appear on the floor. Thinking his days were numbered, Jim panicked and tried to escape, slipping and sliding as a cat would on a linoleum floor. After exhausting himself, he gave up and surrendered to fate. "Okay, I give up." "You cannot. We are just getting started." "Now lay on the highlighted area," the beast demanded. It was then Jim noticed its mouth didn't move when communicating. "What are you?" he asked in a high-pitched voice. "Oh, forgive my crass entry. My name is Rogand, and I'm from the planet Stomali. We use telepathy to relay our thoughts." Jim couldn't help but look over the dark blue creature. The more he scrutinised the beast, the more he believed it resembled a dragon. Yet its head had a more dog-like quality to it. I never thought of myself as having canine qualities, Jim." Rogan flipped another lever, and the wall above the control panel stretched to reveal a reflection. Moving his stumpy legs, Rogan gazed at himself and huffed indignantly. "Dog-like indeed. Now lay down." Jim started bending when Rogan shot forcibly into his mind. "Oh, for goodness sakes, take off your coverings." Jim stood still for a moment, embarrassed about removing his clothes in front of a total stranger. "Never have I seen such an odd species. I have no coverings, and you don't see me blushing, do you?" Looking at Rogan and seeing he wore nothing, Jim decided to throw caution to the wind and undressed. He was cold the moment he arrived, but now froze as the last piece of clothing fell onto the bile-covered floor. Obeying Rogan's command, he lay in the chilly ooze and gagged again at the foul smell. Curious as to the beast's objective, he said, "Just what are you going to do?" "I want to blend you with a species I saved. They lay these past 1,000 years in stasis." "What?" "Do not worry. You and they are compatible. The poor humanoid I removed them from was near death when I found him." "Oh, thanks. That makes me feel so much better," he said mockingly. "So what are these things supposed to do?" Do you remember when I dodged that satellite and revealed myself? Yes, how could I forget? Stella said I was losing my marbles. Well, I scanned your body extensively, and my conclusion was you suffer from a common abnormality in your world. Yeah, so what? You got a cure or something? As a matter of fact, I have. The symbiote life forms will restore every cell in your body once my process is complete. At the prospect of a pain-free life, Jim lifted his head off the floor and said, "What the devil are you waiting for? Let's get started." Without further ado, Rogan pulled on the largest lever, and immediately Jim felt pain the like he'd never felt before. It was so intense, he broke a back tooth during the blending process as symbiotes flooded his body through the ship's organic hull. I need a drink of water. He didn't remember much during the process as he passed out. When Jim woke, he lay flat on his back in the middle of his driveway, fully dressed, with Jess standing over him, wagging a tail. "Must have been a bad dream," he said to Jess, ruffling her ears. "It was no dream," the voice said inside his head. "The sun is rising on your position. Rest while the blending continues." Rogan's advice rattled around inside Jim's head. One thing he did know, it'll taking a long time to get used to telepathy. "How will I know when the little critters are finished?" "Symbiotes," Rogan corrected. "They will communicate when the time is right," came his last directive. "How will they?" Jim asked again. But Rogan was silent. He could no longer hear him. Jim struggled to his feet and headed toward the back door. "Oh well, tonight was the night of first for me. I was the first human to travel via submatter transport. I met Rogan, my first alien. Blended with the symbiotes, not too sure about that one. Rogan said they'd make me feel better," he thought. "They don't seem to be working at the moment," he said to Jess. "I still feel terrible." He fed the dog and then went straight to bed. When his head hit the pillow, he fell straight to sleep. The sound of Stella opening the gates woke him. Gazing at the clock next to his bed, it read 7:32 in the morning. Stretching and throwing off the bed covers, Jim was surprised at how good he felt after only 1.5 hours sleep. Getting dressed, Jim noticed how easily he moved. He used his tongue to feel for the damaged tooth, but gave up when he couldn't find it. Putting on his watch, he reached for his spectacles. Sliding them on, he was met with a pleasant surprise this morning. He got a very different response to the norm. Instead of clearing his vision, the glasses made everything blurry. So he lowered them from his eyes. The vision was perfect and clear again. Raised them to his eyes, blurry. Lowered them, clear. Jim did the blurry, clear routine for a minute or two, then gave up and left them on the dresser. Lessening pain, perfect vision, and no broken tooth, he thought. Well, blow me down. Rogan wasn't lying after all, Jim whispered to himself, walking out the bedroom. Greeting Stella at the back door, he watched her remove her prison-issued footwear, or head-kicking boots, as his son Timothy calls them. "Did everything go well at work last night?" Jim asked, curious to know what happened on the graveyard shift. "Not too bad, thanks, Jim. Night shift is just babysitting, really. They're all locked down. We spend most of our time counting heads, making sure we don't lose any over the fence." "How was your night?" she asked in return. Once again, Jim had to put his mind into gear before opening his mouth. If he told her everything, he's sure Stella would call Dr. Benjamin Wright and arrange for another visit. Stella and Jim are very much in love in spite of everything that's happened since Tasmania, yet he chose to err on the side of caution. "Fantastic, thanks. Jess and I had a ball. Would you like an omelette?" Jim asked, knowing she had a much better time of it than he did. "Sounds great," she replied, placing her boots in the rack. While Stella showered, Jim made her a favourite chicken and cheese omelette. Whilst cooking on the stove, waiting to flip the omelette, he heard what sounded like a distant crowd approaching, hundreds if not thousands of voices. Then silence. Next there was a single voice inside his head shouting, We are here, we are here, we are here. It bellowed in Jim's head. Who's here? He shouted back. Only it was Stella who replied. What that, Jim? She yelled through the sound of running water. Oh, nothing. I just burnt my finger on a frying pan. Jim tried to cover up his slip of the tongue. He heard the shower turn off. We are here, we are here, we are here, came the voice inside his head again. Thankfully, this time they weren't shouting. It was a gentle whisper, so Jim whispered back, Who's there? He said, nerves balancing on a razor's edge. We are now you. For you we care, so don't despair. We and you are now the same, so please choose a name, and then we can refrain from shouting again, the unknown individual stated, but Jim didn't have time to reply. Stella walked out from the bathroom in her nightie and dressing gown. Sit down, kiddo. Breakfast is ready. He slid the omelette from the frying pan onto a plate and placed it in front of her. Stella remarked on how good it looked. Would you like a cup of tea with that? He asked, dreading the voice in his head may return. Yes, thanks, Jim. He turned to walk back into the kitchen when, We are here, we are here, we are here, it yelled in his mind. Jim clutched his head and stumbled for a moment at the sheer volume and power. Are you all right, Jim? Stella asked through a mouthful of food. Yeah, I'm just getting a terrible headache. I'll get you that tea first and then head to the lounge and kick back in the recliner for a while. Okay, do what's best and take care of yourself. Once I've finished breakfast, I'm off to bed, so I'll be fresh for tonight, Stella said, taking the cup and saucer. Struggling, Jim made it to the lounge room with a little more effort than he would have liked, sitting in the recliner and asking the voice inside his head the same question. Who's there? He said again, hoping to get an answer. We are here, we are here. All right, said Jim. That's enough. I heard you the first time. Yes, yes, yes. A name, so we can refrain. Yes, I know, from shouting again. Please choose, so we can snooze. What name would you like? You must choose. To follow and help is what we are. You must choose, the odd-sounding creatures asked. Okay, I get the picture, Jim whispered through gritted teeth. I better come up with a name before you shout in my head again. Think, damn it, think. As if by video replay, the events of meeting Rogan unfolded in Jim's mind. The first human to receive symbiotes. He sounded out names. Manny. Buddy. Rowan. No, those don't sound good at all. How about He-Man? No, that sounds stupid. I know. I used to have a budgerigar named Simon when I was 12 years old. I loved that bird. How does Simon sound? No, wait. Simon with an S-Y. That's it, Simon. In honour of the first symbiote and human blending, said Jim. We like, our name we like. Simon's reply echoed within his mind. Well then, it's a pleasure to meet you, Simon. Call me Jim. Jim it is. Simon we are, for together we'll be from here to far, Simon sang inside his head. What do you mean from here to far? Wanting to know if in any way it related to distance. We repair cells from now till then, so live forever. We're both together. Holy cow, just what other wonders are you capable of? Jim asked, eager to know the answer. We have in us the knowledge of all until trades fall. History, science, enhancements for speed, strength, and more. Just ask and we can help get answers to all. Just for fun, because Jim was feeling rather stupid and elated with his new pain-free body, like a skitty girl boy. He had nothing to lose, so threw caution to the wind and asked, Can you make my car fly? Expecting the answer would be no. We can. The knowledge is here. With gravity in play, the choice is clear. 10 cells we make with guidance for flight. Our car will lift in the air and take flight. Up into the night, they sang again in Jim's mind. Okay, Simon, show me how, said Jim. What have I got to lose, he considered. Nothing to lose, lots to gain. If you have a question, simply ask us again, the symbiotes prattled on inside his head. Simon, I want you to show me what you have in mind. If you want to know why Stella hasn't inquired why he's speaking aloud, well, Jim's always talked to himself. It's a part of his unusual character, and Stella has learned when to listen and when not to. No need to vocalise, just ask from within. Close your eyes and let us begin, Simon informed him. Now they tell me, he thought. Jim kicked back in the recliner and closed his eyes. The vision of a beautiful alien city formed in his mind. A city full of high-rise buildings with coloured glass tinted a beautiful shade of pale green. Flying among them were immaculately built machines, all finished in gloss black paint. Jim's vision zoomed in on one of the occupants inside the flying machine. Rogan was right. They do look a lot like us, except for skin tone. This was light grey. In addition, from what he could see in Simon's recall, was the lack of facial hair. Bald with no eyebrows, eyelashes or ears, and only a small oval opening where ours would be. Then the vision changed to what could only be a factory of sorts, where a trade-billion worker put together several peculiar-looking components, and once completed, it resembled a squat jam jar. The vision faded slowly. Jim opened his eyes. "Is that the cell you were speaking of, Simon?" He directed the question to the symbiotes. "Yes, 'tis the cell when a charge smaller than 9 of your volts will push away from here to pull you there. To make these a list of wares we must prepare. We will assemble in sequence to complete each affair, and when affixed to your car, it will lift in the air. 6 from under, 2 out front, and 2 at the rear, and guidance on board so we can steer." Sang Simon inside their host's head. Jim sent a thought of appreciation to his symbiotes. This vessel empty, our energy low, proteins needed for best results. "Please feed us," Simon asked, adding the sensation of hunger to their demand. "Oh, sorry, Simon. I forgot to eat breakfast," he realised. Jim took a quick peek at Stella when heading to the kitchen. She was sleeping soundly. The frying pan was still sitting on the sink's edge, and he wiped the pan clean to get started on the ingredients, cracking 2 eggs into a mixing bowl, and then felt and heard his stomach rumble. "Damn, I'm hungry." Grabbing 2 more eggs and added them to the bowl. "How does the chicken and cheese omelette sound?" Remembering to think his idea rather than speak. "Sounds great. We can hardly wait to consume what appears on the plate," they sang again. Pouring eggs into the frying pan, Jim articulated himself using telepathy. It won't be long till breakfast. Within moments he sat at the dining table, and in front of Jim and Simon laid a perfect omelette. They ate in silence. While finishing the last tasty morsel, Simon informed him just how unwell he'd been. "Time for a rest, we must confess. Your cells really are in quite a mess. Rest repair is what is needed. Upon awakening, you'll be completed," they sang in their telepathic communication. So it was back to the recliner for Jim. Lying in bed would have been better, but he didn't want to disturb Stella. Jim kicked back in the recliner and got himself comfortable. It wasn't long before he was overtaken by sleep. There you go. That's chapter 1. Blimey, Charlie. I forgot about that. I wrote it so long ago. But anyway, I have polished it a little bit more in the third edition. So it I've added a lot more emotional response to the characters and a little bit more humour. So I hope you enjoyed it. This is one from Ingram Spark, the plain cover I designed a long time ago. My goodness. Oh, there you go, writing back to front. What do you know? Anyway, unless of course it is. I don't know. I think it is, but anyway. So, thank you for listening, and I shall come back another time and do chapter 2 of Eyes Over Earth, Book 1. Goodbye.